Welcome everyone to the 28th episode of My Kid Cures Cancer and the third installment of our My Kid Cures Cancer Thriver stories. We have with us, and I'm sorry, I just realized I'm not even sure I know how to pronounce your name. Is it Dagmara?
Dagmara.
Dagmara Beine?
Beine.
Beine. I knew I was going to get one of them wrong. Dagmara, thank you so much for coming on. Welcome to My Kid Cures Cancer.
Thank you for having me.
And if you don't mind me asking, what nationality is the last name?
The last name is German. The first name, I was born in Poland, so hence the first name.
Very good. Sternagel, German, also got a good deal of Polish in us. So what do you know?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Dagmara, again, thank you so much. And everyone out there watching, thanks for tuning in. This is getting to be pretty neat. We're getting really good feedback on this segment of the show and just really excited to be able to show more real life examples of parents implementing integrative treatments, from people that aren't just Ryan and Teddy Sternagel. It's not just us doing it. There's a lot of people out there utilizing an integrative approach and having really great results. And Dagmara, I am sure, is going to be the latest awesome example of that. So Dagmara, do you want to just, I suppose, just dive in and tell us about, just start wherever you want to start, obviously pre-diagnosis.
Yeah.
And, just kind of tell us what you've been up to.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. So we were your, I would say, typical healthy family. We had our own garden. We tried to eat mostly organic. Looking back now, I see how many things we didn't do well. But working, taking vacations, and had two children. At that time, our daughter, Zuza, was 3.5 years old. And I had a 1.5-year-old at that time, boy, Finn. And we noticed, my husband and I both come from conventional medicine. So we're both physician assistants who were both practicing in the emergency department. And we noticed that our 3.5-year-old daughter, Zuza, aches and pains, loss of appetite. I was starting to read books on behavior for 3-year-olds, just kind of vague symptoms. And I think it's mostly because of the emergency department mentality. Automatically, we thought the worst. And I'm not sure that every parent does. But we thought it was leg pains, but we dragged her to the pediatrician, got blood work, everything looked fine. Actually even saw oncology, got blood work a month before her diagnosis, and we were told everything was fine. And then the typical, I think, for most cancers, especially blood cancers. So we had the terrible bruising and the nosebleeds. And then diagnosis, your biggest nightmare coming true. And that whirlwind of sort of a blur of that first month of a lot of fear put into us of how bad the diagnosis was. So Zuza was 3.5. She was diagnosed with AML, acute myeloid leukemia, so a lot less common. And then we were told, that we have to wait for genetics to find out which type. So there's different severities, and there's a few bad ones that need a bone marrow transplant. We didn't really at that point think outside of the box because we had so much fear. Didn't start researching what else we can do until we found out it was the worst kind, one of the worst kinds of AML that you can have. The hospital that she was actually at didn't ever have a child that age that have had that kind of cancer. That's how rare it was for her at that age.
And what was the specific diagnosis?
AML FLT3. So out in the AML community, that's known to be, you know, there's special groups for that cancer because it has a very poor prognosis. So if you Google, right, that's what you do in the beginning, Google prognosis and all those terrible things, you know, it said something to, like in the effects of 7 to 15% survival rates.
And what are the letters at the end just for everybody?
FLT3.
Yeah, sorry. What you know, what's the classification there? Like, what do they actually stand for and everything like that?
Oh, it's just FLT3. So that doesn't stand for anything. That's
Oh,
just
that's it.
genetic. Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
genetic. Okay. Yeah.
Yep. 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 And so we were told the treatment plan is 3 rounds of chemo and then bone marrow transplant. And then so that was the first month, just a lot of fear, a lot of, this is really bad. I think I got the most hope out of nurses, not like the doctors, but I got the most, you know, and you're kind of, you don't even know, you're just reaching for hope. And I remember begging the nurses, like, have you ever seen this before? Has anybody ever made it? Silly questions now when I look back on it, because there's always hope and there's so much you can do, right? And then when we started treatment, that is when, you know, it was actually my parents that started asking me, are you going to look outside the box? Are you going to start juicing? Are you going to, you know, they started asking me what else we're going to do. And we started doing the research on what else can we do. We knew the conventional medicine part of it, right? So we almost knew too much. We knew all the bad things that could happen. We really understood that part of it just from working in the emergency department and seeing these kids come through and, you know, always thinking it's just such a separate world, never thinking that's going to be your world.
Yeah.
And so we got very lucky when we ended up finding, I knew I needed guidance, right? So there's a lot of wonderful and amazing information on the internet. But at the same time, I feel like everybody's an expert these days. And so it's hard to decipher what's going to work for my child. What, you know, what can I do? What can I do during chemo? And you can't ask oncology, because I know from my experience now, oncology will say no to anything. I mean, they'll say no to giving green juice, and that's food.
Yeah, anything they're not familiar with, that's it's an automatic no. Yeah.
And that's the problem, is they're not familiar with it. You know,
Yeah.
they spend a week in medical school, they spend a week on nutrition, and that's just like what happens when you don't get enough vitamin C. I mean, this isn't really like nutrition. So we found an amazing integrative physician in Europe that we were lucky, you know, through the universe to get in with. And he ended up creating a protocol for our daughter. And that was really my introduction to integrative care. What else can I do for my daughter? So immediately we started juicing. And at that point, she ended up having an NG tube. So that made it easier. I always tell families who are going through treatment, I know it's a scary concept to think of your child having to have a tube, but it's actually such a positive, because you can get everything in them without a fight.
Yeah, no, that's like the minute we realized what that meant. Because yeah, at first, you know, walking through the halls, you see all these kids with feeding tubes, and you see pictures of kids with feeding tubes, and you know, that's the same thing we said was, it's not going to be my kid having a feeding tube. But then when we started realizing, oh wait, we got all these supplements, all this juice, we're trying to get into them. It's, you know, we actually demanded a feeding tube before we ever got around to chemo, and that was weird to the hospital too. It was like, you know, it looks fine now, why do you want a feeding tube? It's like, well, I want to keep it looking fine. Yeah
So we actually ended up begging to have the feeding tube for like 4 months once treatment was done, longer, and like not coming back for follow-up to not have it pulled, because that's the biggest misconception. And that's my biggest problem with the way pediatric cancer is currently approached in conventional medicine, is they tell you you're done when you're done with treatment. And you're not done. Nobody's done. In fact, most of the time people come home and they fall apart because they're done with survival mode, right? We're on survival mode when we're in treatment. And then the healing really starts, right? The detox and all the good stuff that you can do. So yeah, so we started juicing right away. We started a lot of supplements right away, smoothies right away, anything we could get done in the hospital. We did it. And I know that is the reason she did so well through treatment. They told us 100% any child who has AML ends up in the ICU at least once. And this was a 4 or 5 month inpatient. We don't get to go home. And they said, you will end up in the intensive care unit. It's just part of the treatment. She never ended up in the intensive care unit.
Wow.
And
That's
they
great.
called her weirdly resilient. And it wasn't a compliment that they were giving us, or they weren't trying to make it a compliment, but I took it as a compliment because I knew that it was because we were doing all this stuff. And the nurses were great, right? They knew we had our super juice is what we call it in our house, the super juice. And they knew we had our smoothies that we made, and we did breast milk. I asked for breast milk donations. We had it tested to make sure it didn't have CMV and other viruses. So we did a round of super juice, a round of our own smoothies, breast milk when she was inpatient, supplements, all the important oils.
And so the super juice, was it like the same juice every time, or were you just, that was your
No.
name for juice, was super juice?
Yeah, we just always called it super juice. We still do. No, so as many greens as we could get and as much variety as we could get. Also, the fruit that we did do in the super juice, because we didn't need to do any fruit to make it taste better because it was going through an NG tube.
Yeah.
But we did do pomegranate, persimmons. That was it. They really tried to scare us off not using grapefruit at the time, I remember, with the chemo, which scientifically, actually, if you look at that, it makes no sense either. But
You weren't doing, just out of curiosity, you weren't doing like the Gerson bunch of carrots and apple and that sort of thing?
no, I mean, we maybe an apple here and there, carrots, yes, lots of beets.
Okay.
But the other thing that we did was beet kvass, so fermented beet juice. So to get really good probiotics. And
Yeah.
my mom makes it, that's still part of her protocol. We're 3 years out, every day she drinks it. So when you make it at home, every time you're going to get different good bugs in it. And so we make it at home. So that was part of the protocol too. And I remember that it always upset, because they would throw up through treatment, and she always would throw up red because we always had to so it never made staff happy. But yeah, that's what we did throughout inpatient.
And before I forget, do you remember offhand like what all the different supplements you were giving her were, and any tips and tricks for getting all that? And were you juicing in the hospital too, like in your hospital room?
No, they won't allow a juicer in the room. They say it's a fire hazard.
Oh, I remember that. I think we got around it somehow, but I remember the fire hazard discussion. Yeah.
Yeah. So we lived close enough. We lived 45 minutes from the hospital. My parents both quit their jobs, moved in to take care of my 1.5-year-old. And my husband and I quit our jobs and basically lived at the hospital and alternated coming home every day. And so one of us would always pack like a lunch, and it was always like the super juice, the smoothie, the fermented, the beet kvass, and then some kind of food for us because the cafeteria food was, terrible. And then, so we did 3 rounds of chemo. She did, we had our ups and downs, but she did as well as she could be. Fish oil, we did high dose fish oil. The fish oil at the time that I got was from Europe. But now having like my own practice. And so, there's certain ones we're allowed to talk about brands, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Nordic Naturals, or like a good cod liver oil. So like high dose omegas. We did digestive enzymes, a lot of digestive enzymes at the time. Milk thistle to protect her liver. And in fact, we didn't do milk thistle the first month, and her liver enzymes were hundreds through the roof. And then we started the milk thistle, and they were normal for the rest. So somebody could argue coincidence, but I'll argue milk thistle. What else did we give her during treatment? There was a lot of stuff. A multi. We did vitamin C. That's all I could. Chlorella, I believe, and spirulina we did.
Very good.
To start getting rid of what we can, because those are very detoxing. Yeah, that was about it. And then, so we did 3 months of chemo, and then they said now she has to have a bone marrow transplant. If she doesn't have a bone marrow transplant, she's not going to survive past 5 years. And something inside of me just didn't feel right about that treatment plan. And I know that's what it was, and that's what tumor board decided. And so I started doing research, and I found that there was studies in Europe that were showing these small groups of kids who had the same type of cancer, who did not get transplant, and who did okay, more than okay. The survival rate was like in the 82%. And so I did more and more research. Go ahead.
So the survival rate without the transplant was better than you were given initially with the transplant?
Right, but this was all in Europe.
Yeah.
So I got like, I don't know, 15 second opinions. And all the second opinions in America, except for one, said to transplant her, that she has to be transplanted. And this was, the top pediatric cancer facilities. And then all the facilities in Europe, and actually I was so impressed at these physicians in Europe would answer all my emails. I would just find their email, and then all the facilities in Europe tell them what our situation was. And I was so impressed that they would email right away. And they all said, no, you don't need to transplant. No, you don't need to transplant. And so we were in the hospital with her laying in bed sick for most of the time. So I had a lot of time to research, throw myself into this. And I started talking to my husband. I'm like, I don't think we should transplant her. Something in my gut says, don't do it. And for people who don't know about bone marrow transplant, the only thing we hear about on the news is these that it's life-saving, and it is. It's life-saving and often necessary. But they have to give you so much chemo that they completely kill your bone marrow, which, puts a girl at menopause, no matter what age she is, has a 30% chance of not surviving through transplant. And then there's a lot of lung, heart, all the toxicities, right, that all our kids have, just magnified. And they said it would increase her chance of survival by 15%. And so after I did my research and, talked to my family and my husband, it was the hardest decision we ever made as a couple, because we didn't start off on the same page. And that's not where you want to be, right? I felt.
So were you both on the natural integrative train in general, and it was just one of you, or was your husband just completely just conventional all the way at this point?
So we both came from a conventional model. And I think when we first started doing all the integrative, we started using all our integrative tools, my husband got really freaked off. Like we weren't following their rules, right? I mean, a lot of this stuff I was giving her, I learned really early on that I couldn't run this stuff by them, because the answer was no to everything.
Yeah.
And so I had my own pharmacy in the room, basically mixing and grinding and putting in the tube. And I think in the beginning, it really scared him. And so when it came time to make a decision to save her life, I felt at one point that I didn't want to transplant. And I know that that was very scary for him, right? So, because that was the worst thing you can be. I mean, you're going through your worst nightmare, and you have to be on the same page with your spouse. You have each other. And so, it came full circle, and we were on the same page, but it wasn't it took weeks. And then on top of it, when we mentioned to our oncologist that we don't want to do a transplant, they very lightly brought up in a laughing manner in the beginning child services, that we're going against treatment. And so what I did was I created a PowerPoint for the tumor board, that basically pointed out that what they are recommending, that 15%, that 15% is not 100%. It's a very gray area. There's other studies in Europe showing otherwise, and they let us not transplant.
Wow.
So we did not do a bone marrow transplant. And Zuza is almost 3 years out and doing amazing, because I knew that my 15% was everything we're doing that they didn't believe in. So when we came home, after being in the hospital for 5 months, that's really when the work started. So now our day consists of, she probably takes about 15 supplements a day in the form of pills. She's been swallowing pills since she was 4. Super juice, beet kvass. Like I said, I kept that NG tube in for 4 more months, and I really all day there was something going, because she needed it 4 months after chemo. That's all they need is sleep and nutrition.
Yeah, no, we had Ryder's tube in for a good, I think about a year after treatment.
Yeah.
So it was,
oh, wow. I can't believe somebody let you get away with that. That's amazing.
yeah, they were pretty cool.
That's really cool. We do a lot of detox baths based on whatever minerals. So we test her to see what minerals she's deficient in. And then I try to, as much as I can, instead of adding in more pills into her diet, I try to replenish her through like a detox bath. So, or a foot soak. So a good example of that is her last test, she was low in boron. Boron is a mineral that you need in order for your body to be able to absorb calcium and keep it where it's needed, along with the vitamin D. So if you don't have enough boron, it doesn't matter how much vitamin D or calcium you're taking, it's not going to work. And so we do borax foot soaks. So we do that for like 6 months every evening. Both kids do everything. So I always kid around that my youngest, my little guy, who was 1.5 years old when his sister went through this, he's like the healthiest kid in the world, right? He's gotten all the good stuff from the beginning.
Yeah, it's Channing, Ryder's little sister is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get a lot of good stuff.
Lots of good stuff. And they're growing up that way. So it's normal to him. He loves beet kvass. He loves fermented beet juice, to the point where we have to limit him to like a cup a day, because otherwise he'll just have diarrhea. And
yeah, and I was going to ask, so his taste buds are, completely, natural, good palate, all that good stuff. Yeah. It's funny. It's Channing. Everyone just thought it was Ryder that was, just some sort of superhuman toddler sucking down his smoothies and his juice and everything. But Channing, I think, actually loves green smoothies even more than her older brother now. So that's because it's all she's known. Yeah.
Right. And so I have a lot of families coming to me who don't do anything, right? But they know enough that they want to start. And even wellness, right? Not even cancer, but just wellness, well checks. And they're like, well, my kid would never. Yes, they would, right? They would. That's my biggest thing is if their options are A and B, they're going to choose A and B. Like, if you don't have, junk, or, I'm not even talking about soda, but just like juices in your fridge as the only thing your kids drink. If it's an option between fermented beet juice or super juice, they're going to prefer one over the other.
And I'm sorry, so was Zuza's diet more just standard American before all this went down?
I wouldn't go that far. No, we were pretty healthy. It was organic.
Yeah.
We always cook at home. But it wasn't as nourishing as it is now. I guess that's the biggest difference.
Yeah.
I gave her things I would never give her now. I gave her organic whole milk, right, before cancer. And now I wouldn't do that. And she probably got more processed organic things
Yeah.
before.
You get a lot of processed organic stuff.
Yeah,
It doesn't
yeah.
necessarily. Yeah.
Yes. But now it's nourishing. So we eat, I would say probably if you had to compare our diet, it'd be more of a Weston price. So organic fruits, veggies, grass-fed meat. They drink goat milk when they drink milk. So it's more of that.
Hey, just before I forget, or before we
Yeah.
move on, I got a question wondering about your mineral testing. How exactly
Yeah.
are you getting that done?
Yep. So when Zuza was in the hospital, the only way we could get mineral testing done was through a hair analysis. So because nobody would draw her for any kind of alternative test, right?
Yeah.
Nobody would cooperate. So we did a hair analysis, and we probably just did our last one because I have found tests that I feel are better than a hair analysis. But we started off with a hair analysis, and it's a great test. It's easy because you can do it. For instance, we did a hair analysis in America, and we sent the results to our physician in Europe. And now when I work with families across the country, so when I do these tele-wellness consults, if I'm unable to have somebody be drawn because they're not in my office and they have issues, then we'll still do a hair analysis. But I do now use a functional medicine test. It's called a Nutra-Eval. It's a nutritional evaluation. So it's a blood and urine test, and it will give you all your vitamins, all your minerals, and then a lot of other amazing information about your gut and things.
Yeah. Very cool. Sorry, I didn't mean to throw you off. Just wanted to.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So, yeah, so that's what I use now to monitor, among other tests, but that's what I use to monitor my daughter and my patients is I use the nutritional evaluation because it tells me, you could be eating the most amazing diet after cancer and absorbing absolutely none of it because, as we know, chemo and radiation ruins the gut. And so in the beginning, we spent a lot of time, and I'm still doing it, more of a protocol with supplements to heal her gut because some of the stuff was going right through her. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And sorry, I mean, just, sorry to throw you up, but just
Yeah.
please proceed with,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think I was talking about what we're doing now.
yeah.
So she wakes up in the morning. She has, her pills in the morning. Her pills now change based on what her needs are. So we always have her on a multivitamin. I did find out that she is MTHFR positive. So that's a genetic mutation. She's there's mild, moderate, and severe. She's severe. So we have her on a special multivitamin so she can actually absorb B vitamins. Now I'm healing her gut. So I have her on a lot of special supplements to heal her gut. For those of you interested, what that is. So one of my favorite supplements that I use on my daughter and in my patients is called GI Revive. And what does it have in it? What's so great about it? So L-glutamine, super healing for the gut. It has some zinc in it, which we need to heal our gut. It has chamomile in it. It has slippery elm, marshmallow. So those are all things that are very gentle, no matter really how old the child is. I go pretty young with those herbs. And you can make them in a tea too. So if you have kids really young that won't swallow a pill, there's powders and teas. And that's just gut healing. So a lot of these kids, we hear a lot about leaky gut now. And a lot of these kids after chemo is exactly what they have, is their guts ruined. And so we still do milk thistle, turmeric. So we do curcumin, boswellia. And I kind of cycle through things, I'll do something for 6 months and I'll retest and I'll cycle through. Just like we cycle through we do super juice now every other day, and beet kvass every other day. So they always get one, sometimes both each day. Now that it's fall upon us and winter, we do a lot of soups. So probably every day I'll make a bone broth, and then we'll make some kind of a nourishing soup. That's such an easy way to get good foods, good nourishing veggies in us. We do foot soaks or a detox bath almost every night. I know we've done so much more. I'm just blinking. I'm sure it'll come to me as I keep talking.
Yeah, no problem. And so that being said, just to kind of recap here, because I feel like we kind of glossed over it, but initially you were given, what was it, an 8 to 15% probability of survival.
Yeah.
And then you also eschewed the bone marrow transplant, which would have added just another 15% or so, according to their numbers. And Zuza is now how long out of diagnosis and still, I presume, not showing any signs of cancer and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so in February, it'll be 3 years from diagnosis. So they would have, if we would have continued to follow up like we should have, but we didn't, they would have now stopped checking her blood every month. Yes, she's thriving. She's doing amazing. She's a first grader, with long hair and energy and a lot of sass. Yeah, she's doing amazing.
Do you have any just additional tips and tricks for making this all work on on small children? How to get it into them. It maybe not with a feeding tube, or just yeah.
So I think the easiest thing that you can do, and I think you can do it once they're 4 years old. I don't know if anybody's had any luck younger, is to teach them to swallow pills.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you are crushing and tricking, and then you don't even know if it's going to get in. So teaching them to swallow pills, making it fun. I showed her a video on YouTube I Googled on YouTube in the hospital, young child swallowing pills. And there was like a 7-year-old girl who was, you can find anything on YouTube. There was a 7-year-old girl swallowing pills, and that motivated my then 4-year-old enough to be like, I can do that.
Wow. You gotta throw a video writer swallowing his pills on the YouTube channel.
Yes, because that's motivating for kids to see.
Yeah.
Right. And then I motivated her by telling her, that girl's famous. We can make you famous. And I would I would record her, but obviously wasn't putting it up on YouTube, of her swallowing pills. So it helped her. So I think that's where I would put my energy if they're 4. If they're under 4, it's just got to be smoothies. Almost everything can be crushed. I get that question a lot from my patients. But almost everything can be crushed and put into a smoothie.
Yeah.
The big trick is just making sure that they're actually going to finish that smoothie. Otherwise, you don't know what got in and what didn't get in. With little kids in the beginning playing games, the whole family has to be doing it. That's the other, not trick, but we all went through trauma. We all have at the beginning of, at the end of treatment and the beginning of actually starting to be able to do all this at home, nobody's healthy, right? Nobody is thriving. And so everybody should be taking their supplements. Everybody should be drinking their green juice. And so a big part of it for her was, we all do it. Like, we just have to take our pills. There's no, what do you mean you're not going to take your pills? Like, that's what we do. We're going to drink our green juice together. So making it be just a part of your whole life, not making them feel different. They felt different enough in the hospital with no hair, they know so much more than we even think they do. I'm trying to think of, and then we would sneak other things into soups. Soups is an easy thing to, especially with nutrition, to get them to eat. She's not big on mushrooms, so we'll make broths and stuff off of the mushrooms, but not actually put the mushroom in it, you know.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, or when we make bone broth, I really put like my mushrooms, like my dried chaga mushrooms and all that stuff goes in the bone broth, and then she's getting everything I would want her to have out of the mushroom without actually having to eat it.
And just for everybody listening on the gut healing note, bone broth itself is pretty good for such things.
Yes, yes, yes. Bone broth is oh, so nourishing and so good for these kiddos. It
And
has so
pretty
much
tasty.
and oh, especially now with it getting like fall and winter. I think it's important for us to eat local, right? And it's important to us to eat, kind of follow the seasons. And so now is a time of that, what we crave, the warm, nourishing kind of, we don't so much feel like, right now, the hardest thing for me is going to be cold smoothies, right? So I'll do the super juice, but the smoothies are colder, and I'll probably start sneaking more stuff into soups because that's just what the family feels like eating. So, and then the detox baths, my kids don't know what it's like to take a bath without it looking like tea, right? That's just normal.
Yeah.
Um,
Why would you waste a perfectly good half hour on a regular bath when you could be doing something productive with it? Yeah.
exactly. I love black walnut for as like a general, if you're not trying to specifically replenish a mineral. I like to use black walnut. It's antiviral, antibacterial. So I use black walnut a lot. I get that from Mountain Rose Herbs, just because they have a lot of good bulk. And then foot soaks. That's just fun for them. I let them watch TV in the evening while they do their foot soak. Um,
And
so,
what's in the foot soak?
so foot soak is whatever she is um, needing to replenish. So right now it's borax because she needs boron. So um, whatever I can find, instead of trying to give her another pill with some kind of a mineral, I try to do it in different ways. Different ways to try to get things into kids. It just becomes your lifestyle. It just becomes what you do. They become these little human beings that you just never thought, like, mommy, is this organic? Or, preschool teachers telling me that my son doesn't want the snack because he asked them if it's organic, like.
Yeah, I mean, I think, at the end of the day, we just have to give our kids a lot more credit than
Yeah,
we really have been, told that it's possible. Because yeah, it's now, and now that's got me wondering, just everything that Ryder might be capable of outside of just being healthy. He just learned to count to 100 in German, but he counts to 100 in German better than I do now.
yeah,
So it's crazy.
yeah. Do you guys speak German at home?
We count to 100 in German. That's
That's it. Okay. Well, we speak
that's
Polish at home.
nice. Nice.
Yeah. So I retained enough of it, and my parents live below us, so there's like they speak Polish, so it's wonderful. We made a decision as a family when after Zuza came home to live together. So I'm very lucky. The other thing is wherever you can get support, and so like my mom makes the super juices, and my dad does the foot soaks, and it's a team. It's a team effort.
Yeah, that's you. Just getting everybody involved, so it's not like you doing everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And now my husband sees everything that it's done,
Oh,
and
so I guess I didn't. So your husband did eventually. Is he like as gung ho natural as you are now, or what's going on
um,
there?
yeah, I would say, I mean, maybe not as gung ho natural as I am, but yes, he gets it. He saw it, right? He went from um just 100% conventional. It doesn't get as conventional as emergency medicine, right? I mean, there's no integrating stuff. It's just life or death.
It's the
And
best place for conventional too. Yeah.
yeah, the only really place, but um, yeah, he sees it, he gets it, he, supports it, he does it, right? It's a part of his life now, every day.
So I know, yeah, you work with a lot of families now, and we'll get to that soon. But I'm just curious. I tend to see more husbands or dads or whatever you want to call
Yeah,
it, the case may be, in general, resistant to the integrative
yeah,
alternative side of things. Is that has that been your experience?
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes it very difficult, because you're already dealing with something so transformational and life changing, and on top of that, I mean, I know statistics are crazy about like divorce of couples who go through this. I think it's like 90 something percent, so
Oh, is it
obviously,
really?
yes,
I haven't looked into that.
yes,
That's
yes,
makes sense.
it's extremely high, because it puts a lot of the worst stress, your biggest nightmare, and we grieve differently and we deal differently, and um and so that's the hard part. So yes, family after family, it is rare for me to have, um, even a husband and a wife come together. It's usually the wife that's coming in, and um, I discuss it. Right? It was part of our struggle, and everybody needs to be on the same page in order for it to go smoothly. Everybody doesn't need to be on the same page in order for it to happen, but in order for it to truly continue to work, because it becomes your lifestyle. It becomes, now I have two healthy kids, and when one of them gets a fever, um, it we don't reach for ibuprofen or Tylenol, right? And so it just becomes a part of all these decisions that you're going to continue to make in your life. It doesn't always have to do with the cancer. It's just this whole new, um, using all your tools. And I'm on that other side now. I can't, once you get to here and you know as much as you know, and you see what you see, there is no, I would say, going back.
Can't unlearn it.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and that's just Teddy and I and it's just the whole lifestyle. I was just at a luncheon for my day job the other day, and everyone was passing out, I don't know what it was, like pasta and just some very conventionally raised looking chicken. You can
Yeah.
just see it was pretty miserable looking, and I just,
Yeah.
that plate sat on my table the whole time, just because that's how it is. You
Yeah.
can't unknow what you know. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. That's a really good way of putting it. And the more you know, the more you want to know, the more you want to know, right? Like, and it's the education's never ending, That's what's wonderful about it. And it really works. It really works. I not only have this beautiful example of it working in my daughter, but now doing this with other families, it works, and it's just
Yeah.
that part of every protocol, there should be an integrative provider, a real integrative provider. I'm not talking about yoga and acupuncture only, right? I'm talking about all of it on every single team for a child diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're I wish they were more abundant, because naturopathic oncologists or integrative physicians in general still aren't that prevalent themselves, and then not all of them have the experience or are willing to work with kids. And if any holistic providers out there are listening or end up listening to this, I would encourage you to, if you're not already, challenge yourself and work with these kids, because they need it the most. But that being said, they are out there, and you can call around and find them. And I guess that'd be a good spot. We've alluded to it a little bit already, but tell us about what you're up to working with other families now.
Yeah, so I just felt this, I mean, going through the process and diving deep into it, you learn so much. And so I have this master's degree. I'm a PA. I've been practicing in the ER for 15 years, and I just wanted to help these kids just like I helped my daughter. And so I decided to open my own practice. So we officially opened 5 months ago. And it's a brick and mortar local practice. And so I see it's an integrative practice. So it's not just cancer, but the whole motivation, the passion is pediatric cancer survivorship. And so I get a lot of kids who come to me during treatment, and the sooner the better. And then I have even more families finally feel comfortable enough once treatment is done. And I create cancer survivorship programs, treatment programs for them. So we use all our tools. I use beautiful functional medicine tests that I believe in to help us assess where the child is, how healthy is their gut. We put them on the right supplements, we monitor them, and their needs change. So what they may be on for the first year is going to change. And depending on what ages they are, if they're nearing puberty, or if they're nearing wanting to have a baby, there's all these things that we can do because 90% of kids, as you know, who go through treatment have late effects. And then I have also expanded, and I do tele-wellness consults, so that I've made myself available to anybody in, actually I've done a couple in Canada, so I can't just say America, but mostly in America, where we do the same thing, right? We just do it through a live call. So obviously I can't physically touch the child, but I do examine them as much as I can by seeing them, and we create protocols for them, and I follow families across the nation. And there are some labs throughout the nation, like direct labs, and that allow me to still be able to do some of these tests that I do without them being in Wisconsin. And I have families come from, hours away. So they'll make a pilgrimage, and we'll do everything, test-wise we can that day. And then I follow them. So that's been a dream come true, right? So I am able to take everything I've learned. I went back to school for functional medicine, for integrative medicine. I haven't stopped. I can't stop school. So I finish one program and start another one because I just want to keep learning. And I just feel like that's allowed me to help my daughter, and now all these other beautiful kids who deserve it. They deserve a chance to thrive after everything that they've been through, and after these really harsh treatments being their only option in the kind of culture and world that we currently live in. So
Well, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Pain to purpose, I guess you could say. Yeah, no, and like you said, the sooner the better, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. In fact, it's like you mentioned, with most cases, parents don't even have a choice whether their kids are going to participate in the conventional system at all, but doesn't mean you can't be doing everything and more on the side to ensure the best outcome and the least side effects and the least damage and the best long-term survival. Like, that 90% of childhood cancer patients by the time they're 40, I think, will have a secondary chronic illness, and most of those are life-threatening. So, conventional is worried about the 5 years to get their numbers up or whatever. But, as a parent of a child, I'm worried about, my kid living a long, happy, healthy life. So it doesn't stop, like you said.
Yeah. And, even after treatment is done, a lot of these kids go back to their regular doctors for their regular healthcare, right? They don't, every time they get an earache or a rash, they don't go to oncology. And these providers who aren't trained and don't understand what this child just went through further create damage. So for example, giving a child an antibiotic for an ear infection after they've had an earache for an hour, not understanding what that antibiotic for that child is going to do after they just went through, all this chemo, or giving them a steroid cream for a rash that, they'll call it eczema, but what they don't understand, it's just like the chemo detoxing, and now they're putting steroids on top of it. And so I think it's so important to have a provider who understands those things, because regular medicine is just, even if it has nothing to do with the cancer, they're going to continue healing these other things just, unnaturally. And I see it over and over again, with things like rashes and ear infections and things that also, fevers, Tylenol and ibuprofen every 4 hours. I know, because I worked in the ER, right? That's what we said. But now we know better.
Actually, and that's a good, maybe a quick topic to touch on before we wrap up. Just what I'm looking for. It's not just the chemo or the radiation. Once you get in there, it's all these different drugs they try to throw at you. Whether it's the kind of artificial immune boosting, what is it, granulocyte colonnade stimulating factor, the Neupogen, the immune boosting stuff, or all the antibiotics or everything. A few of these things come up more than others. Do you have, working with families that are looking to avoid this type of stuff? Do you I don't know, any examples you have there of natural means for getting by without, quite so much other stuff?
Yeah. So a lot of these things, a lot of the steroids and a lot of the antibiotics, are such a part of the treatment protocol for these families that they would get in trouble, just as they would if they denied the chemo. But the way we have been able to get around some of these things. So for example, a lot of kids will have to take Bactrim, which is an antibiotic, on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. It's just a big protocol for a lot of families for years. And that's usually based on their ANC. So based on their, what their immune system is doing. And we have been able to raise these kids' immune systems and help their ANC naturally with supplements, so that when the doctors look, they're like, oh, I guess you don't need the Bactrim. They don't know why, right? And that's okay. But it's really just doing all this good stuff, right? And I can't tell you, is there a specific supplement that raised the immune system? No, it's multifactorial. Just like disease is multifactorial. Disease doesn't just happen, right? It's an imbalance that becomes a disorder that eventually becomes disease, and conventional medicine only cares about the disease part. Wellness is multifactorial as well. And so when we want to keep these kids well, it's through everything we're doing. It's by taking them outside every day. It's by, taking them on the trampoline and rebounding with them. So it's all of it. It's all of it. But yes, avoiding Tylenol as much as you can when you're inpatient. Not using steroids if you don't need them. So a lot of times they wanted to throw steroids for simple rashes. Anytime you can say no thank you to some of those things, the better for your child, because those are all a really beautiful combination for further hurting them, specifically their gut.
Awesome. And I don't know, do you want to throw out your website and all that good stuff?
Yeah.
I don't know if you even did that yet.
The website is Zuza's Way. So it's ZUZASWAY, zuzasway.com. I'm on Facebook, Zuza's Way Integrative Care. Or you can always call. The number is 262-312-9098. And I would love to hear from anybody, even if you just have some simple questions. I'm always around.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Dagmara, this has been really neat. Just as I don't know, to take us out, if you just had any kind of final thought or sentiment for, everyone,
Yeah.
parents out there going through childhood cancer, that'd be a great way to wrap up.
Yeah. My biggest advice is trust your gut. So a lot of times it's hard for us to decipher when we're going through something very fearful, if it's really our gut, whatever you believe in, God, the universe talking to us, or if it's fear. But most of the time it's the universe, it's God, it's whatever you believe in. Trust your gut. If I would have not trusted my gut and given into the fear, and my daughter would have gone through transplant, I don't know where we'd be. And I think we are thriving, and we're where we are because I trusted my gut in the midst of all the chaos. So listen to that little voice inside of you. That's my best advice.
Awesome. Dagmara, thank you. Thank you so much for coming
All
on
right.
the My Kid Cures Cancer Thriver Stories. This has been really neat. I'm glad we got
Thank
to
you
do
so
it.
much for having me. You guys are doing amazing work. Thank you.
Right back at you.